Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. This is the Iran War Today, our daily briefing, bringing you up to date with all you need to know on the US-Israel war with Iran. Let's start with some of today's key developments. Fighting has resumed after 3 days of relative quiet. A surprise attack by Iran, intercepted by the US overnight. Tehran said it had targeted an American base and command center in Jordan with ballistic missiles. It also said Iranian naval forces had struck 3 oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. The US hit back, carrying out strikes against Iran-backed militias in Iraq, which it says have been involved in drone-based strikes on allies in the Gulf. One of those allies, Saudi Arabia, joined the US in carrying out the strikes. Riyadh has spent nearly 5 months trying to stay out of this conflict since February, but after Iran-backed groups in Yemen and Iraq targeted its oil tankers and energy infrastructure, Saudi Arabia has finally hit back. The joint US-Saudi strikes targeted Iraq's paramilitary Popular Mobilization Forces, which is dominated by Iran-backed Shia militias. The group said at least 20 of its members had been killed, including 5 Iranians. And Donald Trump has threatened to strike again hard. Speaking to Fox News this morning, the US president promised Iran a beating. So, just 3 days after President Trump announced a halt in the fighting, it has collapsed. The US and Saudi Arabia have carried out joint strikes on Iran-backed militias in Iraq, the first time Riyadh has publicly joined a strike inside Iraq since the war with Iran began. Saudi Arabia said the strikes were in response to drone attacks it had intercepted targeting oil facilities in its eastern province and in Riyadh, both of which were launched from Iraqi territory. So what could that mean for the future of the conflict? Here's Sally Nabil from BBC Arabic.
A key question rises now about how far the Saudis are willing to get directly involved in launching further attacks against Iran and its proxies in the region. No one has a clear answer to this question at the moment. But if this scenario is to happen, it means that the Saudi territories will be more exposed to Iran's drone and missile attacks. Since the beginning of the war, Iran has been responding to US airstrikes by targeting different parts of the oil-rich Gulf monarchies, saying that they host a number of US military bases. The Saudi authorities say that this recent escalation comes after Iran-backed militant groups in Iraq have launched airstrikes earlier targeting oil production facilities in the eastern part of the kingdom. The Saudis say they never start an act of aggression, but they only act according to the right to self-defense. In fact, the Saudi oil production process has been a common target to Iran since the beginning of the war. The refineries and the plants have been repeatedly hit by Iranian drones. But if Saudi Arabia is to become a direct party to this war, this means that there are a lot of risks coming along.
Thanks to Sally for that. Well, let's focus in on who it was that was targeted by the US and Saudi Arabia overnight. Iraq's paramilitary Popular Mobilization Forces. Iran has many proxies across the region. Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen. In Iraq, it's a little more complicated. The PMF is the umbrella group. It's mostly made up of Shia Muslim militias. Formally, they are a part of the Iraqi military, a military that is supposedly these days a key US ally. But several of the militia groups that make up the PMF are backed by Iran and have attacked US personnel and its allies on a number of occasions. The PMF said at least 20 of its members had been killed in these US-Saudi strikes on its bases across the country. The strikes in Nineveh and Diyala were said to be the deadliest. The PMF said at least 32 other fighters were injured. Iraq's government has condemned the strikes, with the Prime Minister convening an emergency meeting of the National Security Council. Well, with me in the studio is Kazan Naji from BBC Persian. We've had 3 days, a lull in the fighting, and then suddenly Iran starts up again. Why the escalation and why now?
We don't know, basically. We didn't expect it to happen. I thought the two sides were happy to keep it calm for the moment while they are exchanging messages back and forth through the mediators between Iran and the US. My reading was that soon there will be possibly another round of talks aimed at probably going back to the memorandum of understanding or something to that effect. But obviously that's not how Iranians are seeing that now. My impression is that they've decided, the Iranian leadership, that continuation of this stoppage of war, the way it has been sort of experienced in the last 3 days, is not in their interest, in a sense that if they want to have upper hand and a good position to negotiate, they have to be in a good position. And to be in a good position, they need to be in a better place than they are today. And that means that they will have to sort of resume fighting in the Strait of Hormuz and elsewhere to put pressure on oil prices to go up. There's a sense of urgency in the markets
to try and
put
gain some
pressure
leverage
on the US and bring the US back to the negotiation.
Do you think it's as coordinated as that, though? I mean, you and I have discussed before how much control the new leadership actually has over the IRGC, or indeed whether there are hardline factions in the south that are acting independently of the IRGC command.
It's very difficult to read. We don't know exactly. The decisions are made by the Supreme National Security Council, President, the Foreign Minister, Revolutionary Guard commanders, security chiefs, and so on. This is the council. And what they decide, it has to be approved by the new Supreme Leader. Yeah, that's how it works. Sometimes the Supreme Leader devolves the decision to the Council. Council decides, and that's how it is. But my impression is that these days, because the atmosphere has moved in favor of the hardliners in Iran, the Council itself has shifted from that sort of a centre-ish position that they had until a couple of weeks ago. They are more hardline now. And I assume within that council now, the Revolutionary Guard have the control of it, basically, because they are the fighting force. They are the main element to keep Iran going. So my impression is that the Revolutionary Guards are in the driving seat, but nevertheless, they are consulting with others too.
And of course, they have a finger in Iraq. The PMF, as we've just set out, have a rather interesting role within Iraq. They are part of the military. They're a key part of the country. One of the main groups, Kataib Hezbollah, has today given the Iraqi government until August the 6th to show it can defend Iraq's sovereignty. Who are they, and what problems does a threat like that store up?
The PMF is made of dozens of these kind of forces. Militias under leadership of this or that middle-ranking cleric, Shiite cleric, very loyal to Iran. And these groups are paid by Iran, made by Iran, answerable to Iran, and so on and so forth. They originally go back to 2014 when ISIS was threatening Baghdad, and Iran managed to mobilize forces to stand up to ISIS, prevent them from taking Baghdad. And from then on, they became a part of this scene as a proxy of Iran, if you like. And today, as I said, there are dozens of people, dozens of factions, militias within it, and they are doing their own thing. And a few years ago, there was an attempt to bring them under control of the government, and then there was a decision so that they would become a part of the army, but answerable only to the president of the country. That has been the case, but nevertheless, they remain pretty much a proxy of Iran, and they do what Iran wants them to do. And that's how, in the last few months, with the war with the US taking shape, these militias in Baghdad have become a center, important arm of this sort of Iran's army of proxies. And they are threatening. I mean, I've seen messages on social media by hardliners in Iran saying that we have to activate these people so that we can put pressure on the countries in the region and on the US.
Really interesting. And of course, such big oil interests in Iraq as well.
Yeah.
Kasra Naji, for the moment, thank you very much. We'll come back to the oil in a second. But Donald Trump has been speaking today to Fox News about the attacks overnight. He said in response, the US will be hitting them hard. They are going to get a beating, he told them. Let's pick up on that. Our North America correspondent Daniel Bush is with us. And I understand the president apparently used some pretty colourful language in that conversation with Fox News.
That's right. And I won't repeat it here, but it was a profanity-laced tirade where he said that Iran was going to get hit extremely hard in retaliation for Iranian strikes on U.S. bases in the region. Of course, we've heard this sort of rhetoric from President Trump in the past since this war started. He will often say, we're going to hit Iran hard, we're going to hit Iran in the next day or two. These are threats that sometimes end up getting carried out, sometimes he holds off. The White House is keeping its cards close to the chest, so we don't know exactly where it is that the U.S. might strike. Recent strikes have focused on southern Iran, around the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump has also teased in recent days, though not in that exact Fox News interview, that he might go after Pickaxe Mountain. This is a site where U.S. intelligence believes Iran might have relocated some of its nuclear weapon facilities after they were destroyed in U.S. attacks on the country last year. So President Trump has suggested that might be a target, but we don't yet know exactly what it is that he would hit if he carries out on this latest threat.
Something to watch overnight. Daniel Bush in Washington, thank you very much for that. Well, let's look at why Saudi Arabia's role in this conflict is so important, specifically when it comes to oil. The Saudis shipped over 6 million barrels a day through the Strait of Hormuz before the war started. But when that route closed, it had to find an alternative. Using its pipeline running east to west, the kingdom has been able to get almost 5 million barrels a day out through the Red Sea port of Yanbu. But that route isn't without its own problems. Iran-backed Houthis have now attacked ships along that route, on and off, in fact, for years, and just last week declared a full naval blockade. Reportedly, they're now working with Iran to try and set up a toll system for ships transiting the Red Sea, a move Yemen's government has already condemned. If that Red Sea route and the Strait of Hormuz were both shut, then Saudi Arabia would be forced to take the long way round, instead sailing all the way to the southern tip of Africa. That detour alone can more than triple the journey time to Asia and would send an already stretched oil price even higher. Prices had taken a dip at the start of the week as the fighting eased, but these latest strikes and the ongoing disagreement over how the strait should be managed is starting to send the prices up again. Let's get a view on that. Our North America business correspondent Samira Hussain has joined us from New York. As I say, prices dipped earlier in the week, Samira. How much of that ground has been given back through today's trading?
Quite a bit. In fact, after the comments we heard from President Trump when he spoke earlier to U.S. media, we saw that the price of oil went up by more than 7%. And so a barrel of oil on the international market is trading at about $90 a barrel. And the problem here is that there was this expectation that you would have this cessation of hostilities agreed upon between the two sides, and then you'll see the price of oil coming down. But that isn't the case, and this surprise attack has really we've entered into a realm in which it's even more unclear in terms of where this is all going to go. And so for traders, they need clarity. And there's really not a lot of this clarity. And what this recent incident has really shown is that this kind of instability could be around for a lot longer than many people had originally thought.
And I know we're expecting a Fed announcement imminently on interest rates. It seems to me, Samira, that if oil prices are ticking upwards again, there is a risk that inflation follows it. Does that influence what the Fed decides to do next?
It's interesting because the new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, addressed this in the last meeting he held, saying that no, energy prices, this is going to be it's not going to be a long-term thing. But these recent events and just where we are in terms of diplomatic conversations, it would seem that this is possibly going to last a little bit longer than anyone has anticipated. And that's already in addition to inflation that has been running much higher than what the Federal Reserve would want for quite a number of years. This is certainly something he's going to be getting a lot of questions about later on today after at his press conference.
We'll keep watching that. Samir, it's good to see you as ever. Thank you very much for that. That's it for this edition. Whether you're joining us on YouTube, TikTok, Sounds, radio or TV, thank you for watching the Iran War Today.